Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Cleve Podcast. This is John LaFront, and we are tackling today one of the most misunderstood topics in Christian family relationships. We're going to break this episode into two parts, but this is a question and answer episode where we answer your most pressing questions. So in this episode, in part one, we're going to talk about what does it actually mean to honor your parents as an adult. Many people have been taught that honoring parents means obedience and compliance or never disappointing them. But what happens when you're married, raising your own family, and trying to navigate relationships that have become painful or unhealthy? We're also answering a question we hear more and more often. What do you do when parents who have been distant suddenly want to reconnect after finding out that you're pregnant? And if you've ever struggled to balance honoring family with protecting your marriage, your children, or your own emotional and spiritual well-being, well, then this conversation is for you, and let's jump into it. All right, well, let's get started. We are going to do another question and answer episode today, which I was showing Ashley. Those are the most watched by a long shot. And I don't know if that's just the algorithm likes pushing those out or whether you all love the question and answer episodes, but we actually love it because I think it helps us understand what our community needs and how we can best serve the community. And so we've narrowed it down to 5 different questions that you all submitted to us, and we looked for just kind of some common themes. So people wrote in on our stories. Some of them just come sometimes from comments on videos, but they're ones that I think are going to be really good. So today we kind of have one big theme, I think, of the 5 questions, if I could narrow it down, is how do we honor family without enabling dysfunction? You know, how do we pursue peace without pretending harm didn't happen? How do we follow Christ when family relationships become painful? Like, this is the general stuck questions that people want to move forward with. So let's start with the very first one. And that is, how would you describe a healthy, quote, honoring your parents in adulthood? And this is because there's just lots of discrepancy about the way it is done in childhood versus the way it's done in adulthood. So what do you think, honey? How'd you answer that?
Well, it's something that I have thought a lot about, and obviously it's one of the 10 commandments. So we need to take it seriously. And I've done a lot of personal wrestling with really what this means when there has been harm or even just like issues that need to be addressed that our parents are unwilling to address. And it's harmful to not be able to talk through and work out these things. So I think that I have come down to describing it as, honestly, a lot of forgiveness. For me, when I think of my parents, I don't immediately think of the pain that they have caused me and that I'm experiencing. I think my first thought now is gratitude for them and for the things that they have done for me and the things that they have given me. And I'm not saying that because I think it needs to always be the case. When you're first really realizing things are wrong and I need a boundary and it's not going over well, and then there's estrangement, that's a very painful thing. And so that expectation of forgiveness being the first emotion that you're feeling or gratitude is not practical in that sense, but it is good to know that you can get there. And so now when I think about my parents, it really is knowing and identifying and appreciating what they gave me. I can speak of them without being angry. I can speak of them in gratitude. When somebody tells me that they ran into them, it's not triggering, there are well-meaning people all the time like, oh, I saw your parents the other day. It's so great. That used to be really painful for me. And now I'm just like, that's so great. I'm so glad that you were able to have a good conversation, And because all parents, if you're a parent, you're not doing things perfectly. And I think every person that has children knows that there are things, hopefully, that the children will be grateful for. All good parents are sacrificing for their kids all the time, and you want them to feel that. But also not naive enough to think that we did everything perfectly and that our children won't have to forgive us. Um, and so it's really just for me coming down to that. Are my feelings toward my parents cankering my soul? And that's what I want to make sure I am not leading with or at the forefront of my mind. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it totally does. And I think that that has been an evolutionary process. And regardless of like where the listeners are in this process, to have patience and compassion with yourself, because in emotionally unhealthy families, the parents tend to not want their adult children to grow out of their childhood roles.
Mm-hmm.
And in childhood, honor thy father and thy mother really does mean obedience. They have stewardship over these kids, and you have to teach them. But once they grow into adulthood, and certainly when they're married and have their own families, it transitions into a more mature relationship that is no longer about obedience and compliance. And it evolves into kind of what you're describing, where there is a lot of gratitude, that there is respect, even reverence, that you're not going to talk about in a degrading, humiliating way, that you're not going to seek harm or wish harm upon them, that you're not going to mock them. There's ways in adulthood that you can do that. And depending on the level of hurt, sometimes that can be, I think, challenging for some people. And that is just simply a sign that you need to process whatever pain, might be existing. And that's why there is such conflict there. But the other thing, too, that I think about with how do you honor parents in adulthood is I do just think a lot about just lineage and genealogy. And we've often said the best way that we can honor our parents is to take everything, all the good that they gave us, and then to do even better with it for the next generation. So the goal should be this evolving progression. And we fully hope that our kids will take the good that we were able to bring and they will enhance upon it and do a better job than we did. And that should be the evolution, I think, of true honoring parents down posterity lines. And it's really an amazing thing when you can pause and reflect not only about your parents, but then their parents and just multiple generations of goodness, and also the pain and the heartache and the errors along the way, but really taking all that and then trying to do better for the future generations, I think is kind of the way I think about it with that one. But
yeah, that's true. To take the good and expound on it, and even to cycle break the things that were destructive. Like, I think that there's no better way to honor parents than to also heal the parts of themselves that they weren't able to heal and that they passed on. And so you're breaking that chain of this being a generational issue. Not all issues with people are generational, but some very much are. And depending on how the parents looking at it and whether or not they're willing to even see that can depend on, like, their response will depend on if they can feel grateful for it or not. But that doesn't really matter when you know what you're doing and you see that there's a generational issue and then you're healing that. Even if a parent is not grateful for it in this life, I do believe that they will be grateful for it in the next life and, for eternity, really. So,
well, and the thing that's just interesting when you look at it through that lens, if unfortunately you're in a situation where you have to be in a no contact or a strange situation, if you're doing that with integrity, you've exhausted every possible choice. Sometimes that is the best option. And oddly enough, that is a way that you are honoring the parents as well, is that you are, bounding yourself to protect it for the future. And to your point, they may not understand it now, but hopefully they will in the future. And so you might be feeling guilt for your scenario that you're in. And that's something to just wrestle with and pray with. I mean, because that can be one of the greatest forms, I think, of love in the long run. And that seems confusing, I think, for our brains because we're wired to want to have a close relationship with them. And that still is ultimately always the goal, is a healthy relationship. We hope and pray for reconciliation and reconnection, but that can only happen, under the right circumstances. And so sometimes boundarying is a way that you can honor them as well.
Well, and back to parents really do have control in childhood, and it means obedience. There is a lot of parental control in childhood. And a lot of parents don't know how to work out of that. Oh, I have, that authority to control my child. And we see that's where a lot of issues come through. It might look different, but there's a root in family members trying to control the actions and thoughts and opinions and behaviors of other family members. And really that wherever there's control, there's Satan, right? Jesus Christ came to the earth and died for each of us for the purpose of having agency. That is a central part of our existence on earth. And when that agency is in jeopardy, things are out of whack. And so again, I do think it is love and honor to not allow our parents who maybe have come from several generations of high levels of control. The world in general has this has kind of been a theme. And so if you can stop the cycle and be like, I'm actually not going to let you control me. I'm going to take my agency back and act within it. Again, I think that is a form of honoring. To allow them to control us as adults does not help us, and it doesn't help them. It's not good for them either.
Yeah, and it doesn't help other siblings and their marriages.
Right.
It doesn't help nieces and nephews, grandkids, etc. It doesn't help anyone when you allow them to continue to treat you like a young child. Like, it just doesn't.
Yeah, or just infringe their expectations on you.
Yeah.
It's like, looking at it now, if I were to have obeyed in adulthood based off of every opinion my parents had of what I should be doing, my life would look very, very different right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm so glad that I didn't go down some of those paths that they really put pressure on me to go down,
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Oh, that's good. All right. Well, let's jump into question 2. And that is, this one's an interesting one. We kind of just pre-talked about it before the episode, but just how do you handle parents who went no contact with you, but want to reconnect after finding out that you're pregnant? So before we dive into the pregnancy one specifically, what I thought would be good to just clarify too, is in some instances, and this is the case with us, for example, we had to put a boundary in place. That boundary eventually turned into estrangement, really caused by and continues because of them.
Mm-hmm.
It's their way of punishing us for wanting to put a boundary in place.
And even for wanting to talk about the truth, because those things happen kind of simultaneously.
Yeah.
Let's talk about all the secrets and the many secrets that no one's ever allowed to bring up. And also boundaries, even detached from the secrets, right?
Yeah.
But it's suddenly you're confused. Why is this happening? And why can't we bring up these secrets? But yeah, it was kind of, to your point, just starting a boundary got us in huge trouble.
Yeah. And then for us and our situation, it's a very enmeshed family system. And so like Ashley would try and reach out to individual siblings, for example, and it is a stone wall. They do not respond back. There is no open connection. There's only a few token family members that are allowed to communicate because those are the ones that will enforce the family rules.
Well, and they're also the ones controlling and manipulating.
They're controlling the whole thing. Yeah. So when you see that, anyways, I just wanted to call that out, is that does sometimes happen. And in this case, you often hear, I guess, of adult children putting boundaries in place with their, immature parents, but you do have the reverse that is true too. And sometimes those immature parents are doing it as a result of wanting to inflict punishment for you trying to exercise your independence and autonomy. So it's really messy. And
Again, parents wanting to keep their control,
yeah,
right? You stay in this lane that's okay with us. And if you don't, then we're going to cut you out or give you the silent treatment.
yep.
But then it's kind of gaslit.
Well, and they put like
Yes.
to the public, to anybody
Yes.
else, it's that they'll still put the finger on you of that, well,
Yes.
you put a
There's a
boundary
lot
in
of
place.
gaslighting in
And
there.
it's like, look, that completely flipped in the other direction. And now you're using the mob mentality to try and bully us back into submission. So there are couples that are trapped in this scenario where it really is just evidence that it's an unhealthy relationship and that that boundary does need to go both ways, that it's that unhealthy. But it can be very disorienting of just like, what happened? And I just wanted to normalize that. But on this question specifically, my heart breaks for these individuals because it is so challenging. Anytime a parent does reach out and wants reconnection, like that is a beautiful thing and something that I think any estranged adult child would love nothing more from, especially if their intent really is pure. But it can be so disorienting because the motivation of that reconnection really matters. Are you wanting to reconnect because you want to start taking accountability, you want to have humility and repair, or are you only doing it because you want access to the baby? And that again can be really complicated to filter through. And my personal opinion on it is that you know, definitely don't rush into reconnection because of that. They're still maybe giving you scraps and they may placate you just to get access to the baby. Like to me, it's a red flag that they're only coming around because of a pregnancy. Now, that doesn't always mean that it's the case. I mean, there may be some that it's like they see the error of their ways, they see where this is going, and they're like, we got to get ahead of this before they,
But at the end of the day, all healthy relationships, you will be able to talk about the truth. Can you talk about the things that caused you to separate in the first place?
Yeah.
And can you repair? Now, as I say that, I'm like, well, there is maybe something to being, or what is the phrase I'm trying to think of? Something to be said for not having to address everything and agreeing to disagree and maybe not talking about it. And if the relationship, if you can do that, that's great. And that is fine, I think. Like maybe not everything has to be hashed out, but the problem arises in, does the harm continue if there can't be a conversation and the person kind of keeps doing the unhealthy thing and the patterns continue to cycle, and that's the thing you want to watch out for. So,
well, and the other thing I would, as a word of caution to couples that are in this scenario with the kids, is to not use the kids as a control mechanism as well. The parents tend to try and do things for control, but adult children or the other end of estrangement can be guilty of that as well. I mean, sometimes we've been accused of that, of like that we're, using our kids as pawns in this game, of control. And like that couldn't be further from the truth for us. The thing that's so heartbreaking is we would love nothing more than our kids to have a relationship, especially with their grandparents. And we realize that time is limited, but every time we've attempted that, it has really just continued to blow up in our face. And so I don't know. We're of the mentality that periodic attempts, I think, are good, for reconnection. But you have to look at the fruits of that. And if the fruits are still causing harm to you, to your children, you just have to do the best that you can. But one thing in preparation for this question, I wrote out a possible good response that you could say. So it could be something like, I'm open to talking about what rebuilding could look like, but reconnecting because I'm pregnant needs to include addressing why we became distant in the first place. So you can see that it's, look, you're stating that you're still open, like that it's not a closed wall. You're not, so hard-hearted in that regard. But just reconnecting because I'm pregnant isn't why we're going to reconnect. The reconnection needs to come as a result of us talking about why we had distance in the first place. And that is just super important to reemphasize. And if the parents kick and scream and they, don't want to do it, then it's like you kind of have your answer of whether you should proceed or not based on their response to that question, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Another one too that I put here was just putting in a suggested boundary. We're willing to have a conversation about rebuilding trust, but access to our child will depend on whether we can establish a healthy, respectful relationship with you first. And we have said that to Ashley's parents multiple times too, of like, yes, but we're not going to skip the process and skip the steps. Let's address this first, and then we can talk about that. And that doesn't mean to be a weapon or some type of a wall or barrier that's just impossible to get through. All we're asking is, hey, come to the table. Let's talk about truth and facts, and let's do it honestly and with some humility. And if it's not worth it for them to do that, then it's not worth it for them to have a relationship with the kids, right?
Yeah. Well, and like, just for example, I don't know, this about me. I feel like I can teach best by just sharing my own personal examples because it's what I know and have lived. But my mom and I and my sister actually went to a mediation together a few months ago. And my mom had asked me, Ashley, do you even want a relationship with me? And I said, that was a hard question because the answer is, of course I do. But based off of who my mom is and what she allows, I know that comes with a lot more than just a relationship with her, just her. Because my mom has 7 children and she wants nothing more than to have this one big happy family with absolutely zero negative feeling of anybody feeling anything. And so as a result, just everything gets swept under the rug, right? And so, and the most destructive people are accommodated to keep the peace. And there's a lot of responsibility put on the more rational people to just be the ones who are willing to keep the peace for everyone else. So it's misguided. Anyway, so when she said that, do you even want a relationship with me? I said, I do very much, but I need you to understand that you have many different family members with different motives, different opinions, different levels of integrity and character. And by extension, there are some people in the family that I would love to have relationships with if it ever works one day. And there are others, not very many, but a couple that I honestly don't care to ever see again as long as they continue to be who they are today. Now, I am always open for reconciliation with anybody who wants to do work on themselves. But some individuals, there's been no signs
so
that they will,
unhealthy,
right?
yeah.
So I was just like, I want a relationship with you, but I don't know if you're capable of having the type of relationship I would require, which is I am an individual and you are an individual. You don't come with 40 people for me. And I don't come with trying to, you can't guilt me into that, which is what it's been, right? And so she said in the moment, and, the mediator was like, do you feel like you can do that? And she was just like, what if the others get mad at you? And she's like, well, I don't care, and she was kind of like convicted and bold. And everyone in the room celebrated, even my sister was like, did mom just really say that? That's a huge win for her and just growth for her. But when it came down to it, she has made almost zero effort to continue to build that relationship with me because I know that she's being controlled and manipulated on the other end. And that was very evident. I've always known it. It's always very evident every time I talk to her, but the mediator can see it. And so anyway, she just has to go back and she has to answer to all of these people.
Yeah.
And then they spin the web. So I don't even know why I started telling that story. My mind is a little spacey today. But I think it's just hard because a lot of times when we're reconciling, it's like, can you be individuals and can the family separate enough to allow some people to do different things and exist on different levels?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, the reason why you brought it up is just that families are so incredibly complicated. And when you add children into the mix, it makes it more complicated. And in family systems where people function in an enmeshed and kind of highly controlled environment, it is virtually impossible to penetrate that. And so, you know, like we were saying, we do have those bids for reconnection periodically, but there are sometimes you can even have those magical moments where, yes, we both agree, but then you have, words are just words. Words need to match actions. That is the fruit, everybody. And you just need to understand that. And we've now done this long enough to know that we can't just take words. There have been many times, because we've been in kind of low contact, especially in the early years with Ashley's mom specifically. But repeatedly, she would say things and Ash would go, I really think that she's going to change. I think that she's going to, but inevitably it would come back to, nope, she got sucked back into the system. And even so much in your mediation, I wasn't there. But you had said that, that she came to the mediation and what she basically said was, everything that I've ever agreed with you on ever over the last 3.5 years, I take back completely. I don't agree with anything that you've ever said or done. I was just saying that to be nice or to placate you.
Yeah, she was just like, every time you said anything, and, you know, I pretended that I agreed, but really, I didn't.
You were like, well, we're glad we finally know the truth.
And
Thank
I just
you.
said to her, you know what? So for 3.5 years, you have really disagreed with everything I've said, but have made me believe that you agreed with me. Now, side note, I absolutely know that she agreed with me.
Yeah.
But I know that she's been with people who are manipulating her.
Yes.
She goes back. That's her world. But I just kind of,
and she came into that mediation ready to fight.
Oh, yes,
like
she did. Like she was defending them. And I just said, so everything I've said for the last 3.5 years, you have told me many times that you agreed and have seen the problems and they've concerned you. But that was not truth. And she was like, yep. And I just said, you know what, Mom? You have just identified the very problem in our family. Thank you. There's no integrity in this family. None. People say what they need to say for comfort in the moment.
Or to get what they want.
And to get what they want, there's manipulation. It causes all kinds of distrust. You never know what people are really thinking. And everyone's showing up with an act. And I just said, I can't exist like that. That is not my world. So either way, it looks really bad on her, right? Whether I know she actually did agree with me, but she's not brave enough in the moment because
to act with integrity.
She has been conditioned and prepped before this meeting to come in with a certain attitude. Because I know my siblings have said to her, they've coached her on the back end, Mom, you've made her believe that you agree with her too many times. I can just hear the conversations. Like, I know what was said for verbatim, pretty much, you know? And so they've armed her up and she'll be like, okay, yeah. And at one point I said to her a few years ago, Mom, your opinion is only as good as the last person you talk to. Like, you've got to figure out where truth is for you in any given scenario because you'll disagree with anybody you're talking to. That gets her in trouble. But I feel bad for my mom.
Well, and she even
She's
came in wanting to record the whole conversation. And it's like, why did you want to record the whole conversation? It was because everyone in the family wants to hear what the
yes,
conversation
yes,
said, you know? So,
yes.
anyways, that's a conversation for another day. But back to the baby one, our heart goes out to you. Hopefully, some of those things that we shared are helpful. And certainly when you're a young family like that, it can be so terribly complicated. So
Yeah.
just
And
know we're
just
thinking of you.
protecting the emotional health and wellness of that baby in the family
Yeah.
system. And yeah,
You're doing a
grandparents are
good
hard
thing. Yeah.
because they're full of love, but they can be full of manipulation if, it is a little suspect. So
Yep.
you've got to make sure that you're on solid ground with everybody's impact on your child.
All right, everyone, that is going to wrap up part one of this super important conversation. Thanks for joining us. Stay tuned for part two. And if today's episode resonated with you, we would love to invite you personally to our upcoming live event, Christlike Boundaries, that's happening on June 30th. We'll be diving even deeper into what healthy, faithful boundaries look like and how to navigate difficult family relationships without losing your compassion, your conviction, or your peace. You can also pick up a copy of our new book. It is an Amazon bestseller, and it was a top new release, and it's entitled Christlike Boundaries, and it's available there on Amazon, and it is designed to help you build a biblical framework for boundaries, reconciliation, forgiveness, and healthy relationships. We'll put links to both in the description below, but I just wanted to personally thank you for being here, and we'll see you in the next episode. Have a great day.